Chapter 3. The Human Constitution. The two wills that a human being can aspire to a higher state shows him to be dissatisfied with his present state, and such dissatisfaction reveals, latent within him, a form of consciousness other than mere animal consciousness. But whether a man ignores this opportunity to progress or tries to follow it up, and whether or not he succeeds, it does demonstrate the existence of two divergent wills, corresponding to two different levels of being. One level is that of the animal man, which I shall call the automaton, because it depends on the interplay of its physical, mental, and emotional constituents. The other, to be described in Chapter 4, shows a higher and more subtle awareness than that of the automaton. The two wills may be called the personal will and the will to the light. When the will to the light begins to make itself felt, there follows inevitably a struggle with the personal will, because the two have different objectives and, even more important, do not understand one another. Harmony can only be established if they can be brought to agree, and this requires self-knowledge. The automaton is the foundation of our higher states of being, so its constitution should be the first object of study and observation. Psychology and physiology, as classically taught, have unfortunately complicated themselves with a multiplicity of theories and a detailed analysis of every constituent element and every aspect of every function, when in fact only a synthetic view can reveal the laws of their development and of their vital interplay. In another direction, many students have tried to enlarge their knowledge of the human constitution by observing its correspondences with the planets and the elements. Of course, as an inhabitant of the planet Earth, man has in himself all the correspondences of the solar system in which this planet moves, and the planetary correspondences of every part of the body have been defined in astrology. These relationships are interesting because therapeutic treatment can be based on the analogies between planets, plants, and metals, always provided that the practitioner has a thorough knowledge of all the vital functions and how they may affect the different states of consciousness. For this reason, this very complicated study has an esoteric side which cannot safely be made public. The knowledge of cosmic law on which this knowledge was based is part of a tradition of wisdom that was only taught in genuine centers of initiation. Without this knowledge, the occult sciences will be dangerously subjective, with only a vague reflection of the authentic tradition. Fortunately, their study is not indispensable to the attainment of full consciousness. For this full realization is the one thing necessary, and to this all else will be added. The most dangerous obstacles to it are curiosity after knowledge, for it disperses attention, complexity of systems and opinions, and the method of analysis by dissociation. There is, of course, a great temptation to interpret self-knowledge as an analytical observation of one's psychic reactions, separating out the physical, emotional, and mental sources of feeling in order to control their origins and interdependence. Strict training can affect this result, but its finest fruit, already very hard to attain, can only be full control of the automatic self, that is, of the whole physical, emotional, and mental life. Such control can give one certain psychic powers over oneself and others, but only influences the lower human levels. For the method of dissociation is hostile to any contact with the spiritual nature, whose method is synthesis and union. In such a case, the voice of the spiritual self, on the rare occasions when it can make itself heard, will arouse nothing but vague disquiet, an anxiety caused by the impossibility of establishing contact between two states of being so totally dissimilar. Dissection, or even vivisection, can show the physical constitution of an organism, but will never reveal the secret workings of those vital energies whose normal course it has altered or even interrupted. It will never reveal the magnetic power by which each organ draws its particular nourishment from the arterial blood, which provides the same irrigation for all the body. How, then, can we explain the mysterious affinity which causes different types of cells to specialize the blood into its own nature? The transmutation and assimilation of the same matter into the different energies proper to each organ will remain a secret to the anatomist, just as the transmutation of vital, sexual, or nervous energy into spiritual forces can never be understood by any method based on either dissociation or willpower. If we wish to acquire the one thing necessary in our knowledge of the human constitution, we must study it in such a way as to reveal the interdependence of its different elements, and show how they can be consciously controlled. In studying the human automaton, from the point of view of synthesis, we must consider first the relation of the various organs to the bloodstream and to the sources of vital energy. Then correctly attribute them to the functional groups in which they belong. And, finally, also group them in their regions of mutual influence, without which no true diagnosis is possible. This study, being too technical to stand in the text, has been given in Appendix 5. The object here is to present a simple but comprehensive view of the unity of the human constitution and the interplay of its vital functions. With this knowledge we shall become aware of the harmony which governs them and relates them to the corresponding functions in the universe. We shall also learn how to keep them in equilibrium by acting upon one through the medium of others. Diseases are frequently made worse by a dissociative treatment which attacks the morbid consequences and does not touch the cause. Man is a universe in which the higher conditions can influence the lower if only they are allowed to do so. But in medicine, as in psychology, organic disorders should be cured by setting right the milieu. Local action should be no more than provisional. We shall study as we proceed the means of putting man's various milieus into favorable conditions. But first let us accept into our intellectual milieu the few essential notions that will direct our thought according to our synthetical point of view. Constitution of the automaton. Man's physical being is composed of 5 bodies, 4 of which are materially perceptible. The 5th can only be recognized by the sensitiveness of its points of contact. The 5 are 1. A bony body, the skeleton. 2. A body of flesh consisting of the envelopes of skin and the muscular, fibrous, and connective tissues. 3. A body of vessels or reservoirs, with rivers, streams, and reservoirs. 4. A body of generating stations and channels for the nervous force, namely the nervous system with the spinal marrow, encephalon, and nerves. 5. A body of lines of force, or meridians, exteriorized in the skin as sensitive points which reveal by reflexes the state of the organs to which they severally correspond. These 5 bodies are so harmoniously associated that they are mutually dependent, each having its own nature, rhythm, and role. Together they constitute a complete universe of operating stations which work together to create, maintain, and transform the substances required for the existence of the animal body. The more subtle states of being, which give man his advantage over the animals, have their physical points of contact in certain vital centers through which the automaton is able to open up a connection with them. Our individual world, made in the image of the greater world, has its sun and planets, its cardinal points and poles, its hell and paradise and limbo. If a man really learned to know himself, he could discover which of these, his present attitude, would lead him to occupy on the other side of death. The most tangible manifestation of the world of causes is in the functions which regulate our existence. These functions are incarnated in our bodies in the form of organs, which are specific forms of consciousness. We may call them organs or planets, speak of the heart or of the sun. In either case, we are only referring to a particular functional manifestation of the one life. Our solar system has an active center, the sun, whose globe is the visible body animated by the true invisible sun, the center of all its power. So too, the heart is the central vessel of exchange which regulates the flow of the blood and carries animate life. But the animating fire, seat of the spiritual life and source of the intelligence of the heart, is the occult or spiritual heart. Focused between the physical heart and the solar plexus, the whole cardiac area is its radiating sphere. The activity of the planets is analogous to that of the bodily organs, and all the stations of the celestial zodiac have their living representatives in the metabolic stations of energy in the body. There are thus three manifestations of the energy which animates us: the nervous system, anatomically recognized, the exterior longitudinal system of meridians, and the circuit of zodiacal centers of the secret fire, vitalized by the triple serpent of fire in the spinal column. It is important to understand how the entire organism cooperates in maintaining this fire, whose inexhaustible source is cosmic spirit. The lungs breathe it in with the air which purifies and animates the blood. The digestive organs, vitalized by the blood, transform it into animal heat by the dissolution and transmutation of foodstuffs. And the final product of digestion, the sublimated chyle, brings to the blood and thence to the spinal marrow the specific energies created by the processes of assimilation. Then the secret fire in the spinal column performs the last transmutation, in which the ultimate fire of human genesis is reunited to the fire of its origin. The only thing still needed in this work is one final link, and this depends not upon animal automatism but on the spiritual decision of the individual. This link is the ultimate ensoulment by that longing which can draw directly on the divine source of all things. And, by this miracle of love, myself exteriorizes into the self, and attains the fusion which breaks the closed circle of its egocentricity. We should try to feel the living synthesis of all these manifold concentrating circuits which combine their functions in unceasing cooperation. For the same generative processes repeat themselves unceasingly at all stages of the transformations of being, both in the universe and in ourselves. We can study them separately and try to experience them severally only if we remember that despite the succession of phases in any given transformation, nevertheless the many different stages of the vital process work simultaneously and cannot properly be separated. The next synthetical aspect to be considered is its orientation of the body comparable to that of the earth. The body has an axis, the spine, and two poles: the south, which issues, and the north, which receives. These two poles are the sites of the two procreative worlds. At the south, the sexual procreator, and at the north, the mental procreator. Inside the body, the two poles are indicated by two complementary glands. In the north, the thyroid, belonging to the white principle, and in the south, the adrenals, belonging to the black principle. These regulate the action and equilibrium of the three principles of sulfur, mercury, and salt, and are the link between the body and the two procreators. Furthermore, the thyroid, as north pole of the glandular system of the trunk, acts as intermediary between the adrenals and the pituitary gland in the brain. The right side and hand are active and give, while the left side and hand are passive and receive. The back is passive and sensitive, as are the posterior nerves of the spinal marrow. All the organs which work together in the absorption, transformation, and assimilation of the matter required for physical life are situated in the anterior portion of the body. The four limbs are living symbols of dualization, the legs for movement, the arms and hands for action. The head is in itself an epitome of man, since all the functions of our organism, both apparent and occult, have their signal stations or command posts in the milieu of the brain. One could say that if the body is the world of types, specified as each organ and its component parts, the head is a likeness of the world of archetypes, the principles of becoming. The front and back of the head are as different as the front and back of the body, for the nape of the neck continues energetic activity of the vertebral column, with essential vital points in the cervical vertebrae, the medulla oblongata, and the cerebellum. It is the summit of the pillar of Osiris. The face is the minor of Horus, the word or logos, with the organs of the five senses, which are the five modes of expression of the word. In it stand the two luminaries, the solar right eye and the lunar left eye, two globes whose eyelids create day and night, and the iris is a little zodiac in whose divisions is inscribed the state of all the organs in the body. In the fetus, the two luminaries, the eyes, appear first. Then the planets, the organs, begin to show one after another. The humours. 4 rivers watered the Garden of Eden, and in the midst was hidden the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The garden of our body is watered similarly by 4 humours. 2 are perfect in their origin, and their colours are those of the 2 perfections of nature. One is white, the lymph, lunar in character, the element that gives substance. The other is red, the blood, solar in character, the element that animates and vitalizes. These are the first elements of transubstantiation. The other 2 humours are imperfect because they are elements of fixation and separation. One is green, the bile, the element of separation and dissolution. The other is black, the atrabile, the element of contraction. These 4 humours are in 2 couples, like 2 rivers each of 2 streams, having different qualities but the same origin. Not without reason did the ancients call them humours, for according to their predominance in man's organism, they colour and influence the character of the individual. The bile is corrosive and tends to aggressivity and bitterness. The atrabile is astringent and tends to melancholy, anxiety and doubt. These 2 serve the egoistic will. The blood and lymph are more altruistic. The red blood is a powerful regenerator, and its humour is confident and generous. It is the vehicle of the lower sensitive soul, which corresponds to the Hebrew nephesh and the animal ba of the Egyptians, the animal vital force or animal soul, whose departure means the death of the body. The white lymph is the body's nurse. At the slightest danger, it sacrifices its leukocyton, which rush to the threatened point and use themselves up in building a barrage against infection. These are the transmitters of animate life. The working of the 4 humours both can and should be held in balance, for any disorder will result in useless conflict. Synthesis and coordination of the vital forces. The table of functional groups, nay Appendix I, shows what organs cooperate in creative action on the physical plane. The mutual relationships and dependence of the various organs invite us to study the possibility of controlling them and of working out a therapy which would keep them in balance. The most important thing to observe and understand is the physical and psychic relationship of the organs, especially as they influence our different psychic and spiritual states. Also, of course, their relationship to the two procreative worlds, the cerebral and the sexual. The liver and the spleen form a balance of psychic forces, as can be seen from their specific modes of reaction. The liver contains the characteristics of the physical personality and its heredity, and these color the characteristics of sexual energy, of which it is the reservoir. Although belonging to the central solar system of the heart, the liver, like Jupiter, acts as a personal sun, and like the sun in the zodiac, it has 12 functions: manufacture of blood and glucose, destruction of toxins, purification of the blood, and so forth. Like Jupiter, the father of Mars, it generates the Martian bile. It rules its little exterior universe, consisting of brain and sex. Any ill-timed activity of the bile immediately stimulates the brain activity and sets up a drain reaction of associations of ideas, leading to irritation and feelings of personal willfulness. And so rapid is the circuit that it gives the impression of being simultaneous: bile, brain, liver, spleen, bile, etc. Jupiter is called in Egypt the Star of the South, which is perfectly correct, for Jupiter Amun-Min is the procreative energy. The liver is the energetic sun of the sexual world and the ego. In it resides the seed of the permanent personal consciousness, which, if awakened, can keep it in equilibrium. The liver is the autocrat of the body and can be an agent of peace or wrath, according to how it obeys the suggestions of the central sun, the heart, or those are the three agents of the personal will, which are thinking will, sexual passion, and the egoism of the innate L. The spleen. Unlike the liver, the spleen is in direct contact with the central sun of the organism, the physical and spiritual heart. In relation to the physical heart, its role is earthy and Saturnian, transforming and harmonizing the white and red corpuscles and keeping them in balance. It has a peculiar connection with the pancreas, and these two, with the stomach, have an influence of proximity on the heart. Psychically, as seat of the etheric, astral form which carries the maternal heredity, it is in touch with the astral world or state, that is, the Akasha, in which is recorded the imaginative idea of everything which happens in our universe. It is thus, as the Chinese teach, the seat of the imaginative power, and reacts physically to personal emotions. It is also, with the spiritual heart, the region which reacts to the spiritual consciousness, and thus can be the occult seat of conscious discernment, and of the individual conscience or Mat, being in contact both with this reality and with the powers of imagination and emotion. If emotion and the Saturnian function prevail against the suggestions of the spiritual consciousness, the resulting discord produces splenetic behavior, just as discord in the functions of the liver produces anger or tears. The heart. The nature and function of the heart cannot be understood apart from the cardiac region which provides its driving force. The sun that vitalizes the physical heart is the spiritual heart, which is a center of spiritual fire, which can be stirred up and strengthened by close attention and meditation. The spiritual heart is the seat of the presence, the magnet of our divine car, and its expression is that impersonal love which alone can prevail against all the fires of passion. It forms, together with the spleen, the area which reacts to the spiritual consciousness. By loving concentration, it can become a radiant center of indestructible life. The physical heart is its servant, the minister of the Lord and Master, as the Chinese sages call it. Its activator is the master of the heart. This is a functional command post, and it has its meridian of energy and its discoverable sensitive points, just as if it were an organ. The master of the heart is the agent for transmitting energy between the spiritual heart and the physical heart, and as such, it is in relation both with the conscious mind and with the automaton. It rules the heartbeat and the energy of the whole sexual region, which includes not only the sexual glands and organs, but also, in this context, the kidneys. The Chinese likewise call it the mother of the blood, because it regulates the flow of the blood in conjunction with the small intestine, which refreshes and nourishes the blood with its chyle. Thanks to this activator, the physical heart is the center and governor of the whole organism. For although the lungs are activated by the air and fire that they breathe in, the heart is the center and motor of the circuit, which regenerates the blood in them. Together with its region, the stomach, spleen, and pancreas. The heart is the agent of combustion of the terrestrial food which is to become assimilable nourishment. It collects the blood, which carries the liquids provided by the kidneys and liver, and also the nourishing chyle, distilled in the small intestine. But both the small intestine and the kidneys are regulated in their energic aspect by the master of the heart. This mutual dependence makes it understandable that the functioning of the organs can be improved through the intermediary of the heart. And conversely, the state of the heart depends on the balance of the organs serving it. Control of the circuits. Over and above the interdependence of the organs, according to their relationship in type of energy, in proximity and in function, we have to consider the circuits. All distribution of liquids is performed by circuits whose equilibrium depends upon the heart. Thus are distributed energy, blood, and the products of digestion. These circuits are controlled by the three heaters: respiratory, digestive, and sexual, which in turn are governed by the master of the heart. Ultimately, therefore, everything depends on the master of the heart, and since the latter is the intermediary between the heart and the higher consciousness, through it the higher consciousness can act. Further, since the circuit which regenerates the blood, heart, lungs, heart, is under the control of the master of the heart, one can deliberately influence one's respiration either to calm oneself or to stimulate intense activity. The circuit, master of the heart-kidney sex, makes it possible to transmute sexual force by the conscious action of the master of the heart. Equally, the circuit liver-bile-brain can be controlled by the personal consciousness, which can observe the personal reactions of the automaton and prevent them by cutting off the circuit between the bile and brain. These short examples are given in order to show the possibility of controlling the impulsive reactions of the automatic self by means of an awakened consciousness. The sources of energy and animal heat. A knowledge of functional relationships in the body does not actually explain the activity of the organs, for that depends upon an imponderable power visible only in its effects, which vary according to the degrees of its subtlety. It is usually called energy, meaning the source of all the essential phenomena of heat, movement, and vital stimulation, without which the organic functions could not perform their work. Classical physiology recognizes it as the force conducted along the well-known routes of the nervous system, by which the body is made capable of movement and sensation. The principal organic sources of animal heat are three: the lungs, the stomach with the large intestine, and the liver. The lungs serve to raise or lower the internal temperature and the speed of heartbeat. The stomach and large intestine produce animal heat and energy from the digestion of food. One of the 12 functions of the liver is to energize the blood, and sexual force depends upon its proper functioning. The small intestine, on the other hand, is called in Egypt "he who refreshes his brothers," because it cools the blood by feeding it with the lunar chyle, which is of a cold nature. For this reason, inflammation here can be dangerous to the heart if it deprives the blood of this refreshing element by changing the cold nature of the chyle. The energetic tree of life in the spine works with the nervous energy, just as the distributive tree of life works with the circulation of the blood, added to which there are the plexuses of the sympathetic system, and the even more subtle energies which run along the vertebral column and are called in Sanskrit Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. The most mysterious of the vital circuits is one hitherto unrecognized in the West, although it provides a key to the equilibrium of the bodily functions. The energy from this source flows imperceptibly along the meridians of acupuncture, known in Chinese medicine. It stimulates the activity of the organs and at the same time draws energy from them. The energy flowing along these lines of force is derived from what the Chinese call the three heating powers, by which it affects respectively the respiratory, digestive, and sexual functions. Finally, in order to understand the occult function of the heart, one must also remember the fourth source of energy, the master of the heart, which, together with the spiritual heart, constitutes the cardiac region, of which the physical heart is the visible manifestation. The fire of life. Thus, by studying the organic functions, we are led to consider their motive force, which is the fire of life that vitalizes them in their different ways, and is in fact the essential agent of all the vital functions. For although the manifestations are many, there is only one source of all of them, namely the vital fire which animates the world, the essential light and causal principle of all that exists, called by the evangelist John the Word, and by the ancient Egyptians Horus, or, in its universal connotation, Horus the Elder, Horwer. In its human incarnation it was called the Christ by the evangelists, and by the Egyptians, Horus of Men, or the Horus who rises out of the limbs of the body. The principle is one, though the name differs in every language. It remains the Spirit, the light shining in darkness, the fire of all the sages. Fire, in its various aspects of heat, light, and destruction, is its manifestation. Imprisoned in matter, it is called the dragon in China and Ptah in Egypt. When dualized by its fall into nature, its concretizing aspect is called satanic, or Scythian in Egypt, and its liberating aspect is called luciferic, or Horian. It produces all the aspects of energy, and the reactive aspect which it arouses in everything that exists is called life. In the human body it shows itself as life in the organs and blood, and as energy in the spinal marrow and nervous system. On a more subtle plane it is Ida and Pingala, the double current of life flowing on the right and left sides of the curved wall of the spine, and which, if it functions correctly, stimulates the spiritual current of the Sushumna to rise from the center of the marrow. This triple current is the serpent fire of yoga, and it leads to the coronal center, which is subtle and not physical. It is symbolized by the well-known diadem of Tutankhamun, in which a golden serpent comes up from the back of the neck over to the forehead, where it stands up out of a convolution representing the center of force. The two currents of vital fire, Ida and Pingala, were called in Egypt the soul of Ra and soul of Osiris. The uraeus on Pharaoh's brow, from Iar, that which rises, represents the vital fire rising up to the frontal center on the forehead. This fire is the one source of energy, and its two aspects are called in China yin and yang, referring in general to the complementary aspects of nature. Under the name of Qi, Chinese medicine represents the vital energy as flowing along imperceptible lines which are called meridians. And, on the cutaneous envelope of the body and limbs, these meridians form a network of lines of force. Their existence is proved by the many sensitive points to be found all along them, and they act as exterior reflexes of the whole interior organism. For all the variety of these manifestations, one should never forget that there is only one source of energy, namely the vital fire, mover and agent of all the operations of nature, performing either the transmutations of generation and the coloring of the various substances, or energizing the body and all its parts with interlocking circuits of vital force.